Happy New Year. Thanks for coming out. How many people in this room are designers? Awesome. Okay, so to start off, I want you to turn to the person next to you, look them in the eye, give them a high five. That felt pretty good. So why don't you turn to the person on the other side of you, look them in the eye, and give them a high five. I saw you. Cool. So why are a bunch of designers high-fiving each other? Let me tell you. Your design talent is a superpower, like Spider-Man, Wonder Woman. As designers, we have a unique relationship with the world. We're able to translate problems, ideas, needs into tangible solutions and compelling stories. And these solutions and stories are able to help people that need it the most and able to impact real change in the world. Our profession is ambitious, fearless, and pragmatic. So I've been really fortunate in my design career to use my superpowers to work on meaningful projects. And as T mentioned in the intro, those projects have included working on gender-based violence in Haiti, making voting legislation more accessible in Arizona, and doing blight and disaster recovery in New Orleans. So I've been super fortunate to do what I love. But it wasn't always this way. And as a young designer starting out, of course I was looking for these big, impactful, change the world opportunities. But the opportunities at that point in my career were not so obvious. And as tonight I'm speaking to a group of emerging designers, I want to kind of share my journey to kind of talk about that process. So early on, I wasn't getting these calls, hey, Wendy, you want to go to Haiti? I think I was looking for that, but wasn't happening. So I spent the beginning of my early career just developing my craft as a designer, right? And just making my skills really solid. And then in conjunction, I was working with a lot of nonprofits. And at a point, I leveled up as a designer. And design became less about aesthetics and more about problem solving. Now today we take for granted design thinking. There's everyone oh, of course, design thinking. But 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. And I had to kind of figure it out on my own and defend a lot of this, what we take for granted today as design thinking. And that helped me really translate a lot of needs from these nonprofits I was working with. So when they were asking me to make their site better, what they really meant was, how can I make the experience of getting emergency housing for a family who lost their home in a fire more seamless and comforting, right? Or how can I find after-school care for my child because I'm already working 3 jobs and I can't afford it. And that kind of pivot really changed my career trajectory from a designer to a problem solver. Okay, so just to step back, what do I mean by social good? Okay, so this is a really simple breakdown. Design that is mindful of the designer's role and responsibility in society. And the use of the design process to bring about social good. Right? I'm highlighting mindfulness, I'm highlighting responsibility, and social change. And this kind of generic statement is what I've used to guide my work when things have been a bit murky and fuzzy. What is this change I'm trying to accomplish? And it also grounds me as a person. So at the end of tonight, I hope that you can all define a mission statement for yourself that will guide your work and ground you too. I'm going to share a couple of projects now that I think really exemplify this idea of social good. Two projects that I'm big fans of, and then stuff that I'm going to be working on. So we know that access to education is a universal problem. And in Nigeria, it's no exception. It may be that you physically do not have a school in your village. If you have a school, it might be prohibitively expensive. You may not have the resources to keep that school running. Or in parts of Nigeria, it can be quite dangerous. This is where Boko Haram last year kidnapped 300 schoolgirls at school. So there is a nonprofit called Project Hello World. And for the past year, they've been prototyping this, it's called Hello Hub. And it's a freestanding solar learning kiosk. And they've been prototyping it in a town called Saluja. They're taking an extremely holistic design approach that I will share with you right now. So as I was interviewing the lead designer, his name is Roland Wells, he had this to say about their approach. Help is best when it's not a handout. Let's listen to communities in need so we can give them the tools, resources, and training to attack their problems at the root, creating sustainable growth from within. So it's not this traditional model of the first world going into the third world with, of course, they're good intentions, but resources and money, and kind of like, okay, here it is, bye, I'm done, right? And what happens to those wind-up solar laptops after 2 years or after 5 years? Right? The long-term sustainability is not there. And part of their approach is the team first identifies local activists working in this education space. The activists and the community then vote to bring Hello Hub in. And the first few months are spent meeting with community groups to plan this build out. So they're meeting with families, they're meeting with local government, and they're meeting with women's groups. Right? So there is a sense of ownership. When they're considering the build out, they're thinking about what are local materials that are cost effective, so that if something breaks, it's easily repaired. And the community is literally helping build this thing, so that there is ownership. Okay, so there's a lot of planning going on, and once it's built, where does it go? In the initial stages of their prototyping, they had thought, oh, it makes the most sense to put it on a wall. But they discovered that there was this weird ownership that was happening. So the owner of that wall, whether it was a public building or a private building, became the default owner of the hub. So they didn't want that. Purposely, they made it a freestanding kiosk so that anyone has access to it. It's weatherproof, so there's no worry about it getting knocked over. And as you can see, there's 2 sides to this hub. And there's a site for adults to plug in their devices, and then there's a site for kids. And the site for kids have these built-in educational curricula. One of the design challenges that Roland mentioned was, well, how do you keep the adults from going over to the kids' side, right? Because of course they will. So what he designed was a really, really, really small bench on the kids' side. So if you're an adult and you take over the kids' side, you look pretty ridiculous, sitting on this little stool. Your knees up your chin. The Hello Hub is open source, so anyone in the world can replicate it. They have plans on opening another hub in a nearby community. But since it's open source, the idea is anyone in the world can replicate this. In the Bay Area, it's like tech fantasy land, right? But there's like so much disparity in the Bay Area. Why can't this be used in Hunters Point or parts of Oakland, Vallejo, Richmond? So I think it costs a couple of $1,000s to put together, but once it's set up, then it's the community is sustaining it. The Center for Urban Pedagogy, or CUP, this is a nonprofit that I've been a fan of for many years. And they've been around since 1997. What they do is they're using the power of art and design to increase meaningful civic engagement. So no one says, this law was passed yesterday, how are we going to communicate it to the public? CUP has a few strategies that I will highlight two. And the first is a toolkit. These toolkits are kind of like these interactive tools and workshops built around specific topics. And it's to teach basic terms and concepts so that people feel empowered and they know what's happening to their city and to them. Some examples here. This is an affordable housing toolkit that can be used in neighborhood meetings, at schools, for community organizing. And then this is a what is zoning board game. That you're literally building Lego blocks of buildings. So you can kind of have an idea of what economic development opportunities there are, what zoning means for preservation, risks for gentrification, etc. These toolkits are built in collaboration with the organization, with designers and community organizers throughout New York. There's something called the Public Access Design Project, which are short, intensive collaborations that break down complex policy and planning issues. This can look like a short video, which I'll show you next, an animation, a pocket-sized fold-out or poster. All the materials are bilingual. They're used in the real world. So this is a photo of someone from the Chinatown Tenants Association doing outreach. And all the materials are free. Recent projects include renters' rights, an immigration defense project, and something on labor trafficking. So I'm going to show you a short video right now on labor trafficking. Let's see if it works. I need help.
My name is Josie.
My name is Lydia. My name is Sita, and I am a domestic worker.
I am a domestic worker.
I am a domestic worker.
We came to the US from the Philippines. The Philippines is our home, but it's very hard to earn money there.
The only job opportunities are abroad. I was forced to migrate.
I am a single mom with 4 children. My kids are my life, but I need to leave them so that they could have a good future.
I wanted to be able to send money back to support my family. I got a job from an employment agency to be a domestic worker in the US.
I knew it would be hard work, but I have no choice.
I had no idea what a fair wage should be in America. I just needed a job. And I never heard of labor trafficking. I had no idea what it meant.
I was brought to New York and given a job working for a family. I cleaned, cooked, and took care of the baby. I worked 19 hours a day with no days off. For all the work I did, they barely paid me. Once they paid me $200 for 4 months' work. I was hungry most of the time. My employer kept my password. I couldn't leave the house without their permission. I lived with them for 3 years like this. It wasn't until I found the courage to escape that I learned I had been trafficked. Labor trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery.
I didn't think it could happen here, but now I know that there's a lot of Filipino workers being trafficked to the US. Many Filipino domestic workers are trafficked here by diplomat employers and they are scared to speak up.
We were scared to speak up before we meet others like us through Damayan.
Damayan is an organization of Filipino domestic workers.
Damayan helped us fight for our rights and challenge policies at the root of our problems.
Damayan has put an one-wages back from traffickers, but we need your help to prevent trafficking from happening in the first place.
Join us in the fight to protect workers and hold traffickers accountable.
Help put an end to labor trafficking.
Don't let it happen here.
Find out how to stop labor trafficking at damayanmigrants.org.
Hope you had time to get into the drink. Okay, so, with those two examples, it was a situation where the problem was clearly defined. But it's not always the case. And last year, I spent 11 months as a fellow for Code for America. Who's heard of Code for America? Oh my God, wow. Okay. Cool. We've got some former fellows here too. So Code for America is a nonprofit that believes in a government for the people, by the people in the 21st century. So we're thinking of like the best of tech innovation and government. And when people think of government, they think of the DMV. So of course you can only go up from there. So the city that I was partnered with last year was Mesa, Arizona. And my task was to help the city improve civic engagement, which, okay, sounds good, but what does that even mean? And in these initial conversations I had with the mayor and the council, does civic engagement, increased civic engagement, does that mean more people voting? Does it mean more people at public meetings or fewer complaint calls to City Hall? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. We agree to agree. So I spent all of February in Mesa, and my job was just to listen and learn. I conducted about 200 interviews. I'm talking to many different city departments. But it's so important to me to be in the community and to go to different agencies that provide services, hang out with people, just kind of see how things are run. And I kept hearing from residents this kind of like mistrust of the city. Things happen behind closed doors. Why is there another liquor store opening on my street when there's already 4 in the community? I don't find out about it until after it happens. And from the city, we heard frustration from a genuine, earnest frustration with, we want to connect with residents of our city. However, no one is coming to our public meeting. That's at 7 a.m. on Tuesday. So, my job was trying to connect those dots, having a clear channel with the city and residents. Okay. In February, 2 important observations happened that really informed the product that I ended up building. On the left-hand side is Council Member Dennis Kavanaugh. And we spent a lot of time with him. He's a great guy. At a public event, we noticed that many constituents were going up to the council member and having really friendly, easy conversations about things happening in the neighborhood. And this ranged from, you know, the art center to like the construction on the street, you know, anything you can think of. And the interactions were just like really friendly and easygoing. And I thought, like, why can't all interactions with government be like that? Like, why does it have to be so formal? Right? Why does there have to be a barrier? And on the right-hand side, so it's been almost a year since meeting these folks. And I remember Jeremiah, he's got 14, and Wanda so vividly. And we had an event called Code Across. And Code Across is like an international weekend of civic hacking. So our event was at a library. And Jeremiah lives in the nearby trailer park. And he is always hanging out at the library when he's not in school. Why? Because it's free and it's safe. So he kind of wandered in during Code Across out of curiosity, but probably on boredom, you know, and just kind of like hung out with us all day, which is great. And Wanda, she also lives by the library. She had heard about the event on the radio. So the moment, you know, she walked through the door and said, you know, I don't know if I belong here, but here I am. Of course you belong here. So we spent the day just inviting like local hackers to talk about what they were working on in the civic tech space. And not that it was like a competition, but other Code Across events, you know, people are opening up data sets and building apps. Like, we didn't do any of that, but we made connections. So as we were learning about different projects in the community, during a break, I looked over and I saw this. And this is Jeremiah showing Wanda a crime mapping app. And they're looking up things happening in their neighborhood and having a conversation about it. And it just kind of blew me away, like these two neighbors that would normally probably not hang out are looking at something that affects their neighborhood and being like totally engaged. So in that way, I think our Code Across was like pretty successful. And how can I capture what I saw with two residents connecting and with like residents connecting with city council? What we ended up building was an online platform that kind of took the place of a public meeting. So you're entering municipal, is the name. You're entering your address, and then you get all the legislation that is about to be voted on in your area. And that way you have time to voice your support or opposition. You can ask questions, and you can ask questions to your neighbors, and you can ask questions to the city. And the idea is that everyone is talking in this like kind of other space. You know, you're going to where the people are. So after like kind of one of the most challenging and rewarding years of my life as a fellow, you know, what's next? Does anyone know what this is? It's a sentence, yeah. So I'm looking out at the horizon, and you know, it's 2015. What am I going to do to follow up Code for America, which was like, you know, game changer for me. So there's two projects that I'm super excited about. One is the Detroit Water Project. So imagine for a second waking up, going to brush your teeth, turning on the faucet, and having no water to brush your teeth. Right, now imagine going to take a shower and having no water to take a shower, having no water to flush the toilet. Detroit, as we know, has a lot of financial problems, and because of the bankruptcy, they were selling off a lot of the public utilities, and water was one of them. As a result, a lot of bills ended up being double or triple, and it was affecting people that were already very vulnerable. And when you have to decide between paying for heart medicine or paying for your water bill, it's like unacceptable. So last year, Tiffany Bell, who's a colleague of mine at Cook for America, she's here. Talk to her. She started the Detroit Water Project. It's an online site that matches donors anywhere in the world. You're able to pay a water bill for a resident in Detroit. And already she's raised like thousands of dollars and helped hundreds of Detroit residents, many families, turn their water back on. And so I'm like so honored to be working with Tiffany and using my design skills to scale the project. There's talk about a Baltimore water project and hopefully other cities that need it. And then on Saturday, I am going to Kingston for a month to work with Code for the Caribbean. They're a sister of Code for America. And while I'm there, I'm going to be working with farmers on some key agricultural issues that have to do with like tracking of livestock and crops. I'm not quite sure what to expect, but I'm like super excited about it to like step out of my comfort zone and like be immersed. So needless to say, I'm like so excited about both these projects. So if you're interested in this like design for good space, I highly recommend the book Designing for Social Change. It's by William Drentel. His name will pop up in a second. And this is the intro to his book, and this is how I'm going to end this talk. So he starts off, social design cannot be a subspecialty of the design profession, but it is a larger activity that depends upon design in all its forms. It implies at once an attitude and approach to life. As such, it can help us frame how we want to live in the future. It is therefore inherently pragmatic and results-oriented, simultaneously humble and ambitious, and fundamentally optimistic and forward-looking. So I challenge you all in this new year to go forth and seek out these less obvious opportunities. Create a mission statement for yourself, and think about really how you can use your design talent as a superpower for social good. Knowing that you're helping people that need it the most, and knowing that what you do will make a difference in the world. Thanks. And now we will have an activity. Should we take a break first? Let's take a break first, or drink more, and then if you want to be a part of the activity, we'll move on.
You want to take questions?
Oh, sure. How am I doing with that? Okay. Are there any questions?
So for the Detroit Water Project, I was wondering about what you guys are doing in terms of like civic crowdfunding, or if you've been able to like find civic crowdfunding platforms, or if you're doing it sort of on your own as a separate.
Can I give this to the founder?
Sure.
Tiffany Bell?
I don't want to do it, but yes. Yeah, we pretty much engineer our own platform at this point. Like, we pay directly to the water department, and so there is no sort of like Kickstarter for that purpose. Like you get assigned a person that you help out, and then you go directly to the water company's website and pay it. And so we pretty much built our own thing. It's a very short answer. There's a long story behind this.
How do you? So I was thinking about your technical data, and you identified the problems and identified the sort of like the solutions you wanted to have basically have this interaction happen. But if you don't have structurally the resources to populate the website, how do you
go about being like, I've got this great idea, it's such a great way to reach people, but there doesn't exist already this body of people who are going to enter this data into a database so that people can look it up. How do you sort of go from initial idea that's awesome without the structure that exists and making those sort of things happen together?
So the question is about my time in Mesa and if I'm understanding it right, like how are we populating the data?
Yeah, and how do you
run
make
this
an
platform?
idea to have 1 year and you have this great concept
Yeah.
and you have to somehow create the structures that are going to sustain it and maintain
Right,
it.
okay, yeah. So we have 11 months, 11 very short months, and how do we create an idea that helps everybody and sustain it?
Yeah.
So the sustainability issue and question is huge. And to be honest, like my fellowship ended in November, but they're still building it out. And it's something that Code for America is like very conscious of. In terms of the data, what the city already had was something called Legistar, and that was like this like platform for all the legislative items. But it was like, as you can imagine, like so dense that it was totally inaccessible. So we wrote a script that just kind of like scraped that data. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'd like to ask a question like, what is the biggest difference you will highlight for a designer, which is previously currently working at a company or a private entity? Then later you will come, this kind of like design for social.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the difference in terms of like work challenges? What is the different design attitude as a designer? What is the difference you will highlight to tell a person, a designer who want to kind of like start working on something related to social?
So you're asking what's the difference between working on like social good projects and or
Regular
traditional-
project, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's very similar the strategy that you're taking. But what I mentioned earlier with like things not quite being obvious, I think would be a big one. Like enhanced civic engagement. Like that really can mean anything. We could have gone many directions, or how do I know that this blight assessment app is going to really work? Where I feel like if you're in a more traditional, like product-oriented job, you kind of know what you're working on.
Just more undefined.
Yeah, exactly.
Interested in sort of your lessons learned from working with government to get them to make decisions so that as a designer you can move forward, even if they're a small series of yeses.
Yeah.
How do you structure your work to frame those decisions so that they will make one?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times government, you can't, so you've been doing this for a number of years. In government, you can't get a yes, but you can't get a no. Okay, so you can wait 8 months to get a no.
Yeah.
At least if with the private sector, you can get, no, we don't like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So the question is like, how do you work with governments? Which is a like really good question. So we were fortunate and like we knew that we were going to meet with the council members. We knew we were going to meet with IT, and just kind of assumed that we're this team coming from San Francisco, and we're going to Arizona. I didn't want that like arrogance to cloud their perception of our job and our work. And I really like hit home that it is a collaboration between both of us. And what really helped, to be honest, was we did a ton of homework about what the IT department was already doing. So when we met with them the first day, there were like 20 guys just like staring at me, like staring me down. Our team was like, hey, before we talk about us, let's talk about you. That project that you work on, whatever, on the public parks, that was like so impressive. Can you tell us more? Like, we noticed that you use Ruby or whatever, right? And I think that kind of won them over. It was like San Francisco nerds talking to like Arizona nerds. And I kind of like put their guard down. So I found many local champions in the city hall, and they were essential in getting us the stuff that we needed. Yeah. We gotta do-
Yeah, running low on time.
Okay, all right, we're running low on time.
Yeah.
One more question.
So you were talking about how you started out as a designer and you're interested in doing things that make change. But that you didn't, nobody was saying, oh, come to wherever and fix things for us.
Yeah.
So you mentioned briefly working at nonprofits. Was that like the main stepping stone, or like just in a little more detail, how did you go from not really having access to working on these projects you were interested to actually being invited to places to work?
Yeah, exactly. So question is like, how did I make that transition from doing like, design work to doing more like social good design work? And it was working more and more with nonprofits. Because once you work with a couple and you build up a body of work that kind of demonstrates like this social good realm, then more opportunities like that came my way. Because they will then like recommend you to other nonprofits, and then having like been familiar with that space already, just kind of like opens more doors.